Hey everyone, it's Sevy. Fontaine brings a lot of new enemies to Spiral Abyss, which now has mechs and seafood, so we have some new enemy mechanics to cover. Now that it's here, it's important to note that this abyss is entirely doable without Numa Osea aligned units. I know there was some concern leading up to the cycle about how necessary Numa Osea are to beat the floors, but I can already tell you that while they help, going in with solid teams and the right elemental counters can already do the job. And to avoid having to verbally repeat my usual general tips for doing Spiral Abyss, I'll just flash them on screen here and you can pause to take a quick read. Also, this cycle's blessing buffs your character's attack and/or EM, depending on whether their HP increased or decreased, which is very on brand for Fontaine's combat mechanics so far. Anyway, time to dive in. Let's first see what Floor 11 has in store. We get our first taste of seafood here with stern shield crabs, a bubbler seahorse, and cherubic sea hares. To help us, there are pyro and hydro damage bonuses, which is appropriate because the enemies on each half are mostly collected into pyro and cryo enemies, which will make you want to bring hydro and pyro units to counter their shields respectively. But first half has electro shields also, so dendro would be pretty good too. For the first half, I brought a Hyperbloom team, and the hydro and electro units will help with the shields. For the second half, I put in a Mono Pyro team with the Yanfei, Bennett, Shangling, and our brand new Lynette, who's pretty underleveled, but whatever. Of course, there are several other team templates that would work well, so use what you have while paying attention to elemental counters. Anyway, let's get it started. As usual, we have a Defend the Monolith in Chamber 1, and the first half spawns all Pyro enemies, so of course Hydro will be helpful here. We start with 2 slimes, a Whopper Flower, and 2 specters. The specters will target the monolith first with their projectiles, but with the slimes and Whopper Flower, there's some RNG whether they'll turn to you first or start going for the monolith. If you want to ensure their attention, then you can run past them or near them on the way to the specters, then start getting rid of the specters first. But if you have a crowd controller, you could suck the enemies together or at least stagger and disable their attacks temporarily. The next wave of specters and slimes spawn separately, but they spawn with an opposite layout to the last wave, so you may have to move around a bit. Their behavior is generally similar to the first wave, where the specters will, by default, target the monolith, and the slimes will either go for you or go straight to the monolith. I'll prioritize the specters, but I try to face the monolith so I can monitor if a slime is heading towards it. If one is, then I approach the slime to make it attack me instead, while keeping the specter's heat on me. As for the Whopper Flowers, they get annoying once they've fully charged up. So if you can afford to interrupt their charging, it would be a good idea to do so. All throughout, do your best to keep the fight away from the monolith, since you don't want the enemy's attacks to damage it while they hit you.
Ring cutter, no, my sword! Our bond is strong!
On this half are all cryo enemies with a similar layout, but here target the slimes ASAP and break their cryo shields. These cryo slimes might slam the monolith, have their frost breath attack that will deal damage over time, and shoot cryo projectiles that will target the monolith. The cryo Whopper Flower and specters will naturally go to you. As the succeeding waves of enemies spawn, keep paying attention to the slimes since their attacks are the biggest threat to the monolith. And again, try to stay away from the monolith so that if the cryo slimes start targeting you with their projectiles, frost breath, or slams, then the monolith is safe from harm.
Cue the spotlight! Motion to compel! Inadmissible evidence! Boom boom! Everybody stand back! Let's look your toast! Out of the frying pan, let the magic begin! Over here! Incinerate!
In the next chamber, spawn the sea creatures, and let's briefly go over their behavior. The crabs start with ranged fireballs, but afterwards they tend to scuttle towards you and then slam you. The seahorse, on the other hand, uses ranged lightning attacks. I'd approach the seahorse first and align its back towards a crab, so that as it moves backward, it moves closer to the crab. Counter its electro shield to kill it faster. When the crabs are done with the fireballs, they'll slam towards you, which makes it easier to group them up and kill them all together. Afterwards, 2 electro churls will spawn side by side. You can just run to the edge of the arena to edgebait them and group them for your AoE attacks to hit all at once. But remember to dodge and iframe their attacks since they can hit really hard.
Ring cutter, dissipate! Hey, stay put! Ha! Hey, go away!
On this half, we start with a wave of cherubic sea hares. They naturally approach you, so you can set up your attacks right away on the one in front of you. And you can also crowd control them to collect them faster. Be careful to dodge their attacks though, because they can actually stagger you with their drilling motion. Also, they have cryo shields, which you can easily get through with pyro or electro. The second wave are small bathysmal bishops. They'll first spit out projectiles, which you'll want to dodge or else they'll drain your energy. Then you can push them towards each other or bait them for easier grouping.
Teamwork is dreamwork! You're toast! Motion to compel!
Third, we have Cryo who hit really hard. If you have a lot of time left, you can actually wait out their charges and slams and start attacking them once they're done. But if you want to go for it right away, they can also be edge-baited to keep them together. Just make sure you dodge their really big hits since they can just one-shot you. If they generate their cryo shields, as long as you have Pyro or Electro on the team, you should be able to get through them quickly. In the third chamber, we start with 3 Nobushi. You can edge-bait them or approach them at the side and group them onto each other. Use your AoE attacks to make quick work of them.
Know my sword! Ring card! Lightning purified! Don't be scared! Stand with me!
After they're dead, 2 Kairagi will spawn. You can either head towards one immediately or bait them towards you with their charged attack. As always, keep them together so they die at the same time and don't have time to regenerate. But if one does regenerate, as long as you have enough time, then you don't need to restart. Lastly, we have a Primo Geovishap boss with the Ice Element. This one's a straightforward fight if you're already familiar with it, and it will go faster if you bring a shielder.
Cue the spotlight! Everybody stand back! You're toast! Nice and spicy!
Keep dodging and iframing its attacks, and when it starts doing its special breath attack, you can either block it with a shield or just try to dodge it without one. It does create crystallized shields as it's attacking you that you can pick up to generate a temporary shield in order to block the big breath attack. After, just keep doing your rotations as usual to kill it quickly.
Time for your arraignment! Motion to compel!
Now we can move on to floor 12. On this floor, our new enemies consist of mechs, with the Suppression, Annihilation, and Construction specialists, Hydro Phantasms, Breacher Primus, Emperor Crab, and the mech ballet couple. The mechs and Breachers have Numa Oseo weaknesses, so that'll help if you bring such units. For team recommendations, the first half will want good single target damage since you've got 2 bosses. Hydro will help a lot against the Emperor Crab boss and Pyro Fatui you'll encounter, so for this team I'll be going with Hyperbloom. On the second half, bring anything that can tickle a cryo shield, because Coppelius generates one during his boss fight in the last chamber, and there's a cryo assistant mage on this half too. The fastest will be a pyro unit, but using Electro, Animo, or Geo can still bring down the shield as well. I went with a pyro-focused team, but an aggravate team would be promising too. Just make sure you have a reliable healer or shielder because the enemies on this side can hit quite hard. Anyway, let's begin. First, we have our good old buddy Magu Kenki. You'll notice that Magu Kenki's spawn location has moved towards the center, which has an effect on our positioning strategies. You can set up your abilities while he's getting up, then dodge his attacks and get his HP down.
Witness the power of Gawad. I'll settle this. Don't be scared. Dissipate.
Once his HP reaches 75%, he'll do his charging attack, so just get ready to dodge or tank it. Now, since Magu Kenki spawns at the center, we can't do the trick where he gets cornered at the map edge. As such, you'll have to chase him more whenever he teleports away. Then just keep dodging and iframing his attacks and try to get a lot of energy back before the fight ends. This Magu Kenki has a lower level than previous Kenkis that went in deeper chambers, so it should be faster to kill.
Scatter! Lightning purified! Know my sword! Our bond is strong! Propagate!
For the second half, the first wave starts with 4 Phantasms, which later transform into their enraged, melee, and ranged versions. These can be sucked in if you have a strong Animo grouper like Kazuha or Venti. If not, I recommend attacking the Phantasms spawned nearest to you since they transform into the ranged Phantasms. The farther ones are the melee Phantasms, and when they transform, they'll naturally come close and ideally get grouped up with the ranged ones. In case you didn't know, when they transform, they will be immune to freeze. But since they have innate hydro auras, you can take advantage of that instead for other elemental reactions, like using Dendro to create blooms or Pyro for consistent vaporizes. For the second wave, we have 2 specialist mechs, which have Dendro and Pyro attacks, plus 1 Cryo Sisson Mage that will spawn. You can either focus on the Dendro mech or the Sisson Mage since they're ranged units, and the big construction mech will naturally charge towards you since it's close ranged, so you can easily group it up with the others. I targeted the Dendro mech first because it was closer. On the other hand, the Sisson Mage can slow you down with its cryo application or set you up for melt damage when you get pyro or burning applied to you or vice versa, so you can also focus on the Sisson Mage first instead. If you have an Animo grouper, simply suck up the Sisson Mage and Humanoid mech together. As you're killing them, watch out for the construction mech, as its hard hits can really throw you off.
But my defense was watertight. Inadmissible evidence!
For the next chamber's first half, we're up against Mr. Krabs. He has pyro horns that increase its resistance and enable its strong attacks. It's highly recommended to destroy them with counter elements, with Hydro and Electro being the fastest at breaking it. AoE attacks and manually aiming will hit the horns, but some attacks which have a smaller hit area can have a harder time actually hitting the horns. For example, Xingqiu's rain swords will inconsistently hit the horns depending where they get launched, and Yelan's skill does not hit the horns. Upon destroying the horns, the crab gets paralyzed and has reduced damage resistances, which makes the fight much easier. If it goes underground and regains its pyro horns, just repeat the same process. It's also a game of the floor is lava, so pay attention to its lava ground attacks as those can sneakily whittle down your HP. On to the next half. For the first wave, 3 Eremites will spawn in a line with a Pyro Lore Master in the middle. If you have a crowd controller, use it at the start to group and disable them before they start doing their big attacks. I recommend just focusing on the Lore Master, since the 2 melee Eremites will just follow you and naturally group together. But their hits can stagger you quite hard, so be sure to dodge them as much as possible too. As usual, you can try destroying the Summon Beast first to disable and more easily kill the Lore Master. If the Lore Master dies before the other 2, you can start luring it to your spawn point so you're already positioned where the next wave will spawn.
Teamwork is dreamwork! Inadmissible evidence!
The second wave has 2 Breacher Primuses. These 2 don't move around, so feel free to put down your AoE setup as soon as they spawn. Anyway, one creates a Dendro Shield, the other creates a Geo Shield, which you can destroy with counter elements. If you brought one of the Fontaine units, using a Numa Usia attack can also instantly destroy the shield. And when their shields are down, they become much less threatening and easier to kill.
Time for your arraignment! Teamwork is dreamwork! Let's light Booba! Get them! Eat this! Surprise!
Now we have the final chamber, and we have a Dendro Eremite and 2 Pyro Fatui in the first wave. Start by positioning yourself beside 1 Pyro Fatui and face them in a line. This will cause the Fatui to jump back into the other enemies and group them easily. You can also apply the same strategy to the other Fatui before it jumps back. Then the Dendro Dancer will spawn a cage, which you can avoid once you see it on the floor, plus a snake, which you can kill to weaken and disable the Dancer to defeat it faster. If you have crowd controllers, you can easily group up and disable them as well before they move around too much. As for the 2 Pyro Fatui, an ideal run will need to keep them together since they have a tendency to spread apart. Once those are dead, the second wave has 2 specialist mechs that are Usia aligned, so hitting them with Numa will cause them to lose their Arche. I find prioritizing the male one to be faster since the female one dashes to you faster as well, but reversing it could also work. The female mech spawns a turret where it appeared. You can take it out if it's convenient, but I don't find the need to anymore, and if you defeat the humanoid mechs even while the turret is up, the battle will end anyway.
Stay put! Ready, go!
Then for the last chamber, we get the Nemesis of Coppelius boss, and it's Numa aligned, so you can use Usia attacks for special effects. These mechs will do spinning attacks of Cryo and Animo, so watch out for those. They will stay together until they do their special attack, where the male mech will gain a cryo shield. During this time, the female mech will be circling the arena and dealing ranged attacks, which you can dodge. The male mech doesn't move, so just stick to the male mech to keep hitting it and break the shield ASAP. The fastest elements against the shield would be Pyro or Electro, but if you have an Usia unit, with Lynette being the only available one as of now, she can also instantly break the shield. Then watch out for their animal slashes and cryo attacks, which can hit for a lot, especially if it triggers a reaction like when you're using Bennett. Having really strong shielding or healing will help you withstand both melee and ranged attacks, especially since you're trying to dodge the ranged attacks and that will divide your attention. Otherwise, you can play it safe, keep your distance, and focus on dodging. After the shield is gone, they will go back together and resume their usual combos, so simply repeat the process until they're dead.
Objection! Yeah! Teamwork is dreamwork! Let's... Incinerate! Goba, get them! I'm going in! You're toast! Be amazed! Time for your arraignment! It's a jury.
And that's it for this abyss. Thankfully, the elemental counters needed are more or less consistent for each half, so there wasn't much need to use different teams for different chambers. Overall, it seems like a relatively tame introduction to Fontaine Abyss cycles, but I bet upcoming cycles are probably going to be harder. But what did you think of this cycle? Let me know in the comments whether you've already finished it, are trying it out, or are having a hard time. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!
Benny's adventure team!